All right, back in the basement again today. I want to talk you through this really quick dip station setup that I've been using a lot for dips in my programming. I've posted on Instagram a couple times. I always get a lot of good feedback from it. Thought I'd just show it off and talk about what it is. So as you can see, it's a dip station that is rack attached, but in this case, it's attached using a safety spotter arm. Now this one in particular is from Oak Club. It's called their Alpha arms. They live on my rack. I really got them to lift outside of my rack or just to be versatile inside the rack because at the time I didn't really know of any companies offering 30-inch flip down safeties for a Rogue type rack. The Rep ones were available, but you needed to do a little bit of modification to get them to fit. So I've been using these for a variety of use cases, and most spotter arms, especially ones for 1-inch hardware racks, will also have mounting points on them where you can attach other things like a utility seat, a handle in this case, whatever your heart's desire. You have a lot of options. They're very versatile pieces. In this case, I'm using it for a dip station. So I've taken this and attached to my rack at a height that I like, sticking out to the side here, so that way I have good clearance above, below, in front, behind, anywhere. It's pretty much in its own little space, and the only potential place you could hit this is right in front of you, which I'll talk about in a second. I've then gone and attached some Mutant metal handles. These ones are 12 inches. They're threaded in the back, so that means they're super secure on this arm itself. 12 inches, as I mentioned, fully knurled, stainless steel, 45 millimeters, so they're thick boys. Really nice, high quality handles, which I use for other things like neutral grip pull-ups. If I want to get really crazy, I might even throw them on these lever arms and use them as handles to do pushes and cleans and all sorts of weird stuff that I would never show or do on camera. But it's really nice, and in fact, this is kind of very do-it-yourself version of what Mutant Metals offers already in their dip attachments. However, those get a little bit more complex when offering angles and rack storage and whatnot, but all of this stuff technically can be stored on a rack because I keep it on my rack already. I keep my handles in the back, I keep my Alpha arms on the side. Again, that's one of the things I really like about this setup compared to my dedicated Sorinex piece. So this is all stuff that, number one, lives on my rack already, but also I use for a variety of other things versus my Sorinex piece, which although it's rack mountable, takes up a lot of space on the rack and gets in the way. So I've been keeping it on the floor where it's been collecting dust just because dips come and go, and oftentimes in my program, they go. But I've really liked doing dips on this again because some of the higher end features of the handles themselves, the variety I have of going wider or narrower as I need to. And I just like this setup again because of using pieces that I already own and use for other stuff as well. So I don't need to have a dedicated dip piece. I just have other pieces where I can make a dip station. So I've liked this a lot. Now, some of the questions I get with this is, what about the clearance? As I mentioned, these are 12-inch handles. They look fairly short. It's actually a positive in my opinion because it's more compact in a sense. So if you're in a tight space, again, not only are you reusing pieces that you might be using for other things, but you can get away with shorter handles because this is not attaching to a rack right in front of you like the Sorinex dip station would be, where the handles need to be pushed back further. Because as you lean forward to do dips, you might run into an upright if you're too close. In this case, because it's out and away, you have no potential of running into anything, and you probably would never run into this arm based off most people's range of motion. So I'll show you some B-roll of what that looks like, but nice, clear, and out of the way. Now, of course, there are some limitations with this. Number one, I think what people might see when first setting this up, especially if you're using the Oak Club Alpha arms like I am, is this has quite a bit of play on it when attached to a rack. I do not think that is a big deal because even if you look at the dedicated rack attached dip station, that does have equal amount of play in use. Both this and the Sorinex version that I have are very tight tolerances because of the force driving it down. I have seen some other attachments out there that have quite a bit of shake while in use. This one does not. The Sorinex does not as well. However, like I said, there are more features and benefits and pros of this one than using the dedicated Sorinex model or storing it on the rack. A downside for this, however, could be that the fact that you are very wide and these handles don't go as wide. So these spotter arms I think are about 27 inches in length or so, give or take an inch or two. I'll take an inch where I can get it. But you can only go so wide on this. So that's going to be a limiting factor depending on how wide you want to go. For me, someone who is 6'3", and I don't consider myself having narrow shoulders, this is actually the perfect dip width. I probably wouldn't want to go any more narrow, but I also wouldn't want to go any more wide. That would be very awkward. So this is like the perfect Goldilocks version of a dip station for me. You can also get pretty creative with this where you don't have to use these pieces that I'm showing you. Obviously, you can use a spotter arm from any brand as long as it has mounting points for the handles you're interested in. But for instance, you can also use flip down safeties like I will show you in some B-roll right now. So if you wanted to do this on the side of your rack, you could. Get a little bit claustrophobic doing that. I don't like that as much as using this one, which sticks out. But again, you could do that depending on what you already have and own in your own home. And the handles themselves, while I really like these Newton Metal ones, they are a bit pricey. In fact, they're really pricey for a lot of people. So most people probably won't have these laying around. They'd have to go out and buy them, which I think is worthwhile. They're great handles, which I probably should do a dedicated video on. However, if you want to go a less expensive route, you could get something like utility pins from Rep, for example, that only costs 50 bucks. So if you already have a spotter arm or flip down safeties and you have the appropriate mounting size posts on them, you could get a $50 solution, which basically turns that into a dip station. Now, the downside of a Rep example is the fact that, number one, the way they attach is not the screw-on threaded nut on the back. It just uses kind of a little detent pin to keep it secure, which is going to add some wobble and shake to it. However, again, in use, I don't find that you notice it hardly at all. But the actual finish on them is more of a textured, kind of a little bit smooth finish, so I don't feel like you get as good of a grip on here, I should say on the Rep version, as you do on the Newton Metal knurled version. And in fact, you might not even get as good of grip on those because they're meant for plates versus what you'll find on a dedicated dip attachment. So again, it's a downside or trade-off, but I think for most people it'll be fine. You can always chalk up if you find that they're a little bit too slick for you. So there are cheaper options out there as well. But again, the too long didn't read of this is I think this is a nice, easy solution. The way that it mounts gives you plenty of space to use it in any form you want without having to really worry about where you're going to potentially hit or knock your head into or the weights into itself. And you get a lot of variety and higher end finishes with these pieces. Let me know what kind of solution you would use for your dip station in the comment section below, or tell me if you have something like this or if you're trying. In the meantime, as always, thanks for watching and stay big.